Today, America witnessed yet another episode of The Trump Show. But this episode was not a comedy, but a shameful tragedy. Yes, Donald Trump once again found himself at the center of a masked ball, at a time when the country was experiencing one of its deepest crises. A Great Gatsby-themed party. No joke, it's real. While millions of Americans faced hunger as basic food aid ended, the country's president sipped champagne from crystal glasses. Welcome to our channel. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe so we can continue to expose these contradictions. Because there are many who forget what is happening in this country, but very few who remember.
It's not as if we didn't see some of this coming. I will admit it's worse than even I expected, but I did warn y'all. I did. You can run the tape. And by the way, he warned you too, because he said what he was going to do. But the fact is, there were plenty of people who voted for Trump and the Republicans anyway. And it wasn't because they wanted to give up the right to free speech or see our public health systems torn down, but because they were understandably frustrated with inflation and gas prices and the difficulty of affording a home and worries about their children's future, and so they were willing to take it.
Trump's lavish party is not just a rich people's club gathering. It is also a symbolic declaration. It seems to say, "My reality is not defined by your misery." But the irony is that the party's theme, The Great Gatsby, is precisely a novel about this kind of blindness, greed, and moral decay. Trump, like Jay Gatsby in Fitzgerald's novel, is a figure stuck in the past, clinging to illusions. But the difference is this: Gatsby's tragedy was a personal delusion. Trump's is a national-scale disaster. His fantasy is not to make America great again, but to watch it in his own giant mirror.
Okay, so Harry, when we're looking at races, you've got New York, you've got New Jersey, you've got Virginia, so much attention being played to these three races. What is happening? How much of those races is actually a test of Donald Trump? How much is it actually about the races themselves and what's happening in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, look, if they're a test of Donald Trump, then Donald Trump can't be too happy with what we're seeing in the data right now. I mean, you talk about New Jersey. What do we see there? I know a lot of Republicans want to think that Jack Ciattarelli is closing the gap, but in all honesty, what we see there is that the Democratic candidate, Mikey Sherrill, has a clear advantage, about 6 points. That's the closest of the three races that we're talking about. Virginia, you see Abigail Spanberger way up there by double digits, up by 10 points. And then, of course, you were just interviewing Andrew Cuomo, but you see that Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee, is ahead there by 16 points. At this point in time, and granted, Election Day, we'll see what happens, but at this point in time, to me, it seems like the Democrats are most likely going to sweep all three of those races, and that's in part because of Donald Trump, but it's also in part because, especially in a place like Virginia, they have a much better candidate than the Republican candidate.
Looking at the names attending the party makes the picture even more dire. Marco Rubio, Jeanine Pirro, and a handful of media aristocrats all in the same gilded room, oblivious to the rest of the country. Throughout history, empires have collapsed when feasts were held in palaces while the people starved. Marie Antoinette's "let them eat cake" epitomized the French Revolution. Now, in 21st century America, the "let them eat cake" moment is being reenacted. But this time, instead of cake, gold-dusted macarons are being served. And this scene is no coincidence. Trump has been playing the same political theater for years, feeding off crisis, manipulating the masses with a false narrative of victory built on misery. Recall the 2017 tax cuts. They rewarded billionaires and pushed the average American into debt. In 2020, during the pandemic, he made statements on luxury golf courses, saying everything is under control, while millions were unemployed. Now, in 2025, he's throwing a great Gatsby party while millions go hungry. This is no coincidence. It's a pattern. The economic picture is clear. SNAP benefits have been cut by $186 million. The government is still shut down, and 42 million Americans are trying to survive without food assistance. But Trump doesn't care. In his world, hunger is just a TV ratings issue. Poverty is background music, feeding his own propaganda. And the scariest part is that this indifference has now become a political stance. A Republican congressman's statement that if the poor stopped using drugs, they wouldn't go hungry sums up this mentality. This is not just a sign of elitism, but of a departure from humanity. As we criticize this picture, Obama's last words ring in our ears. Trump told us what he would do. Yes, he did, and we watched. In 2016, he promised a wall, and he built a wall of hate. In 2020, he said, "I will help the poor," and he funneled aid funds into his own hotels. Now he says, "I will make America proud," but he has turned the country into a reality show stage. Instead of the contestants he fired on The Apprentice, he now watches people in food lines. It would be naive to think such a symbolic party is a coincidence. The Great Gatsby is not just a novel, it is a summary of Trump's management philosophy. Glittering on the outside, rotten on the inside. The burlesque dancers performing that night were actually the stage decorations of this system. The cocktails carried on silver trays were versions of the people's hopes poured into crystal glasses. The Trump administration is a crisis dressed up in finery, and beneath every spotlight, a darker shadow looms. When hunger, unemployment, and despair are growing in this country, and the president's only concern is looking good in photos, the issue is no longer who Trump is, it's what America has become. And the answer to that question lies with us. We will continue to speak the truth, expose hypocrisy, and extinguish the false glimmer of this golden age. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel to support broadcasts that don't hide the truth. Because if we don't tell this story, they will rewrite it.